All right, let's have our Bibles open to Revelation 7 for a moment. And in Revelation 7, remember this is the first half of Revelation, which ends in chapter 11 and ends with the destruction of the temple. So the first 7 classes of this series, we stayed on the time that it was written, the book of Revelation, and only to set up to give us a direction on what I believe, at least, the book of Revelation refers to, which I believe is an expansion of Matthew 24, verses 3 through 34, the destruction of Jerusalem. I believe that Revelation parallels Matthew 24 and can be explained and very easily understood, or more easily understood, I should say, if we understand it to be simply something for that people at that time and for the persecutions they face at the hands of the Jews. So I believe it was written in the 60s and therefore refers to the destruction of Jerusalem. Most people take a different view, and so if you have that view, that's all right. You may offer your comments on those things as we proceed along the way, but that's the direction that we've taken in the class, and so that screen here shows us that. Here is the outline of these chapters, 4 through 11. Remember, 1 through 3 sets up, gives us the 7 churches of Asia. It gives us a picture of Christ. But here is an outline. I try to make it simple, not for you, but for me, of how the book of Revelation is set up, at least in the first half. And we have a chart for the second half, as you'll see, basically set up the same way. But that will be for later time, 12 through 22, which I believe is simply a duplicate of what we have here with different embroidery as far as details are concerned. But here we have the commission of the Lamb, which is chapters 4 and 5 are very simple. A commissioning, John's in heaven, he's in the throne room, and here's what he sees. Then we have the seals, the action beginning, chapter 6. The action begins in chapter 6 as he opens the seals. There's a book given to Christ, and he opens the books, or the book, it's actually a scroll, and it's sealed by 7 seals. And so as he opens each seal, there's different action that occurs. And that's what we have in the first 4 seals that are open. The 5th seal, remember, revealed that there were souls under the altar, and those souls had been beheaded for the testimony of Christ, and they were crying to the Lord, "How long do you wait? Do not bring vengeance upon those who persecuted us on the earth." So that would be a very simple thought process here as to the persecutions they faced in the first century. Whether you take the book written in Nero's reign, which I do, or in Domitian's reign in the 90s, basically the same message is there on that one. So then we have, finally, the other seals are open, and these are parallels. We saw those last time. Parallels with Matthew 24. And we have the same language that is used, same figures of speech. So now we come to the 6th seal, and that, or the 7th seal rather, ready for the 7th seal to be opened. But before the 7th seal is opened, there is a pause in the action. That's what we have. We're having a little intermission here, but it's not a commercial. It's an intermission to show you a side scene, what is occurring here with God's elect, God's people. That's what we have in chapter 7. Chapter 7 divides into 2 segments very naturally and easily. So let's look at Revelation 7. We'll read the first portion of it only. We'll take a glance at a couple of thoughts on the second portion, but just to give us the outline and overview of it. So after this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that no wind should blow upon the earth, on the sea, or upon any tree. I saw another angel ascend from the sun rising, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a great voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, "Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we shall have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads." I heard the number of them that were sealed, 144,000. Sealed out of every tribe of the children of Israel, the tribe of Judah, and then he lists the tribes, so just glance at them. Judah and Reuben, verse 5, and there's 12,000 of each. Then we have, also Gad is in 5. In verse 6, you have Asher and Naphtali and Manasseh. Then in verse 7, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, then Joseph, and Benjamin, and then those were the 144,000, 12 tribes, 144,000. There are some peculiarities in the listing here. We'll talk about that in a moment. So that's the first portion of it. So let's look at the second portion. After these things, and I saw. So did you notice the language and the formula that John uses? Verse 1, after this I saw. And now we have, okay, another vision. This is verse 9. After these things I saw. Just shows you, it's setting you up. All right, here's another vision. This time, a great multitude, which no man could number, out of every nation, of all tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne, before the Lamb, arrayed in white robes, and palms in their hands, which I take as a symbol of peace. And they cry, saying, Salvation unto our God, who sits on the throne, and unto the Lamb. And all the angels were standing round about the throne, 4 living creatures, the elders, that would be the 24 elders, 4 living creatures. They fell down before the throne on their faces, and they worshiped God. Verse 12, blessing, glory, wisdom, thanksgiving, honor, and power might be unto our God forever and ever. Amen. So one of the elders answered and said to me, These that are arrayed in white robes, are they, and whence came they? I said unto him, My Lord, you know. He said to me, These are they that came out of the great tribulation. You might need to mark that, great tribulation. There's the passage. And they washed their robes, made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore are they before the throne of God. They serve him day and night in his temple, and he that sits on the throne shall spread his tabernacle over them. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun strike upon them, nor any heat. For the Lamb that is in the midst of the throne shall be the shepherd, shall guide them into the fountains of waters of life, and God shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. So then we have, as you noticed, 8 and 1. All right, now he opens now the 7th seal, and there followed a silence in heaven about the space of a half hour. So now the 7th seal. So before the 7th seal is opened, he has these 2 connected visions of chapter 7, which includes, of course, the 144,000. So first of all, let's think about the background. From whence did John derive his material or his symbology? Where did he get this? Well, the answer is in Ezekiel. We won't go to Ezekiel. We don't have time to go reading through it, but on your own sometime you might look at Ezekiel chapter 9. So in Ezekiel 9, Ezekiel has a vision, and the vision is, now remember, let's think about Ezekiel for a moment. Ezekiel was a prophet in captivity. He was in Babylon, but Jerusalem had not yet fallen. Remember, there were 3 waves of captivity that carried the Jews to Babylon. And Ezekiel was in the 2nd wave of captivity, taken approximately 597 BC. The city itself, his home city of Jerusalem, that he longed to go back to, and all the Jews thought they were going to go back home pretty quickly, they were mistaken in that. It was not going to be that way. Remember, Jeremiah says, no, you better sit down, you make houses, you make fields, and you just sit down and rest, because it's going to be 70 years captivity. They didn't believe that because there was a false prophet, Hananiah, and he said, oh no, it'll be 2 years, you'll go back home. Ezekiel confirms Jeremiah's message and says, no, it's going to be a while. You better just relax, make homes, and stay here. But regarding what's going on back home in Jerusalem, here's what Ezekiel says. He has an angel, and he has an inkhorn, and he says he goes around and marks on the forehead individuals. Gives them, what is the Hebrew letter is the tav. He puts a tav on their head. Well, what does that mark for? It's for those who are protected from the persecutions that are about to come. That is, the message is the city is going to fall. It's going to be horrific, but there are some who are going to be spared, those who are righteous. They'll be spared from some of this. And that's the idea of the marking on the forehead. I think it's chapter 9, if I'm not mistaken. Is that in chapter 9, the man with an inkhorn? I didn't bring my Old Testament in here. I should have, shouldn't I? If I'm going to refer to it, I just need to have my Old Testament with me.
Verse 3.
Yeah, chapter 9, beginning in verse 3. Yeah. So the man with an inkhorn goes and marks these people on the forehead. Now, that all is symbolic. It's not literal. There's no literal mark on the head. We know that it's simply symbology or symbolic of the protective custody that God gives to people. Now, John has taken that whole figure and adapted it and brought it over into Revelation. And that's exactly what's going on here. So he's marked on the foreheads individuals who will be spared the persecutions that are coming. Well, what persecutions are they? Think about this for a moment. In the 144,000, they're all of what nation? Huh? Israel. They're all Israelites. They're all Israelites. But they're spared. Here's my thought, just broadly speaking. In my mind, how can we come to the text and see it and say, no, Jerusalem's already been destroyed, and this refers to something else, and this refers to Christians from different... Then who are the Christians in verse 9, where there's a more widespread net of all nations, peoples, languages? Who is that then? Here we have Jews that are protected by God. Well, from what would they be protected? I think the answer in everybody's mind would have to be the destruction of the city and the destruction of Judaism at 70. I think this is one of those passages that speaks so plainly that he's protecting Christian Jews from the destruction of Jerusalem. And then later he sees a group of other individuals from every nation, every tribe, every tongue, verse 9, and they're already in heaven. They've been persecuted, and they sing a song before the throne. So there's you have the two halves. Isn't that simple? That's what we have. Now that's my understanding of Revelation chapter 7, as well as it gives us a good broad view of what's going on. He's protecting Christian Jews. All right. So what are your questions regarding the 144,000? Number one, is it a literal number? The answer obviously would be no. For one thing, we don't have, or let me back up, let me say it this way. There are, throughout the book of Revelation, there are a series of 12. So we have 12 foundations, and we have 12 gates of the city. This city measures 4 square. It's all, these all are symbolic numbers. That would be at the end of Revelation. There are 12 tribes, but these are right here, 12 tribes, and we have some tribes that are missing, don't we? Don't we? You all have memorized from childhood all the tribes of Israel, right? And so you see some are missing. Can't we? You see that? For example, let's look at verses 5 and following. You have the tribes that are listed. Number 1 is Judah. Then you have Reuben. Okay, well, let's just start from the top. Oldest son. Who is the oldest boy? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. Those are the first top 4. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. All right, do you have all of those in the list here? We do. We have all of those in the list. Then we have Gad and Asher, Dan and Naphtali. All right, all right, did I just mention a tribe that is not on the list? I did. Dan. Dan's not there. Why? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why he's not there. But he's not mentioned. So I'm thinking, well, this is not a literal reading, and the numbers are always these multiples of 12, 144,000, 12,000 out of each tribe. I think it's simply a number of completeness. Here's something else interesting. You see the tribe of Joseph? See that? That would be in verse 8. Well, there is a tribe of Joseph, but it was broken into 2. What were the 2 tribes into which it was broken? Ephraim and Manasseh. So Joseph was a tribe, and so the Old Testament prophets will address the tribe of Joseph, but it's really the tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. Do we have both of those listed in this list? No. We have Manasseh.
Well, Joseph is a synonym for it.
So Joseph would have to be the synonym for it. So it's interesting that he changes up how it's been listed from the Old Testament. That's right. Brother Bruce is right. Joseph would be the synonym for it. So it's changing it up right there. So there we have some of the tribes that are missing. Furthermore, you have in the 12 tribes that are listed, Levi, remember, never received a land inheritance. They were treated differently. They received cities and the districts around the cities, but they didn't have tribal territory. So that's why when you look on the map, you don't see, okay, here's where the tribe of Levi lived. They're all dispersed. So those are some idiosyncrasies or some peculiarities, a better way to put it, of the list that we have here. I take it that it's simply a reference to the complete number of those who are spared during the persecuting period of 67 to 70, Christians that are Jews, Jewish Christians. Now, here's something else to think about. Is it possible to trace your lineage today to a tribe of Israel if you're a Jew? No. No, it's not. Why? All destroyed in Jerusalem. The records were wiped clean. There's not a person alive that can say, I'm from the tribe of Ephraim. I'm from the... You can't do that. Not possible. It's all gone. So that happened at Jerusalem. So now, what else does that say about this text? Well, referring to Jews who are identified tribally that are spared destructive powers that are going to come. And that's what we have in the first 8 verses of chapter 7. Now, that's my understanding of it. All right. Any other thoughts on it? I don't want to just run too quickly that you, okay, well, now wait a minute, I didn't catch that one, you know, that kind of thing. Furthermore, you might notice at the end of chapter 7, the songs that are sung in verses 14 and following are those who came out of the Great Tribulation. That is, what is the Great Tribulation? What is great? Well, I'll tell you what, let's save that one. We need to get to that because that is one of those sugar stick concepts that is talked about all over the Christian world as if somehow we're about to enter into the Great Tribulation period. Obviously, that's not true, but we'll see. We'll see a little bit about that in just a moment. Now, here's something else you might notice in chapter 14, verses 1 through 5. This connects the first half of Revelation, chapters 1 through 11, to the second half, chapters 12 through 22. Because in chapter 14, what do you have? Well, you have, I saw, behold, the Lamb standing on the Mount Zion, with him 144,000, having his name, the name of his Father, written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, of great thunder. It was as the voice of harpers harping with their harps. What kind of voice was it? As of harpers harping with our... Okay, does everybody have instrumental music in the church? Do you know that's the very argument? One of the very arguments that people use to introduce instruments into the church. Well, they had instruments in heaven. First of all, this is not literal, number one. And number two, it doesn't say they're all harping on harps. It says they had a voice as harpers harping on their harps. And even if there are instruments in heaven, we still don't have authority for them in the church. Had to say that as we pass along the way. And they sing a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures, the elders. No man can learn the song save the 144,000. They have been purchased out of the earth. And the earth, remember, is, as we talked about before, is the same word as land. Out of the land. That would be out of the land of Israel. They are they that have not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they that follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These are purchased from among men to be the first fruits unto God and unto the Lamb. First fruits. What is that? Those are the ones that were initially persecuted. Christian Jews who are killed for the cause of Christ. And here we find them in chapter 14. So there's the connection of both halves as well as showing us where we have those 144,000 again. So let me mention a couple of things regarding just about the number 12 for a moment. Just to give us an idea, I have a couple of passages listed. You might just jot them down. You don't have to turn over there and try to find it. and you can verify it later, but these are passages in Revelation that have 12 listed, simply showing us it's a symbolic number. So we have chapter 21, verses 12, where there are 12 gates in the New Jerusalem, guarded by 12 angels, bearing the names of 12 tribes. It measures 12,000 furlongs. Its wall is 144 cubits. That's 21 and verse 16. Then we have 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel. That would be Exodus. There would be 12 pillars because there were 12 tribes. That would be in the tabernacle, Exodus 24. There are 12 cakes of showbread, Leviticus 24. Why 12? 12 tribes. 12 memorial stones, Joshua 4 and 5. 12 bullocks for all of Israel, Ezra chapter 8. That would be when Ezra offered the sacrifices for the Israelites. And now we have 12 times 12 by thousands, and that would be 12,000 by 12,000, 144,000. So there we have some ideas regarding the 12. Once again, why is Dan omitted? I don't know. Simeon, what I wanted to point out, is omitted in Deuteronomy 33. Maybe Dan was extinct. I don't know. Remember, Dan had a terrible time in the book of Judges, and they about lost their entire tribe. They had to go find women for them elsewhere. You know, like sobbing women. So that's what they had to do. So that was in the last of the book of Judges. So all of that shows us this is symbolic about the 12,000. All right, so any other thoughts on it? Anything you want to ask regarding the first portion of this interlude? Let's look at the second half, which is verses 9 through 10. And these are those who have already been persecuted, because we find them where? Verses 9 and 10. Where are they located? Yeah, right before the throne. Yeah, right in front of the throne. So they're in heaven already, and they're already there, and they're from every nation, tongue, and tribe. All people. That is not simply Jews. Gentiles are also Christians at this time, but they've been persecuted. And so we have them standing before the throne, and they ask about this great tribulation. And John answers, or the angel answers to John, says, these are they that come out of the great tribulation. All right, let's think about a couple of things regarding let's think about the great tribulation first of all. And then I wanted to go back to the 144,000. We have three passages in the Bible that mention the Great Tribulation. One of them is in Daniel 12. The other one is in Matthew chapter 24. So you might turn over here. Matthew 24. And the verse, I think, is verse 15, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see if that's right. I may be wrong on the verse there. No, it's verse 21. I was wrong on that verse. Matthew 24 and verse 21. All right, now let's set the pace here in the book of Matthew, chapter 24. According to Matthew, there are three questions that are asked. When shall these things be? The sign when these things come to pass, and the end of the world. The word is end of the age. Apparently they were thinking this would be the end of the Jewish age. That's my thought on it. But I'm doing that in comparison to Mark's questions, how Mark gives us the same chapter, same wording throughout, except in Mark he has two questions. What are the two questions? Jesus had just said this temple is going to be destroyed. They say, well, when shall these things be? When shall the sign when these things are about to occur? Those are the questions they're asking. When you go to Luke 21, Luke gives us a full account of the same speech that Jesus gave, Luke 21. And Luke has two questions. When shall these things be? What shall be the sign when these things are about to occur? Those are the two questions. When we come back to Matthew and it says end of the world, we automatically think, okay, they're thinking about the second coming of Christ and Christ coming again and the end of the world. No. They didn't know that he was leaving. That doesn't preclude him from talking about his second coming, which I believe he does later in the chapter. But that's not in their mind. They don't think he's leaving. Why would they ask about his second coming, the end of the world, and we think of it in 21st century terms, the end of the world, the cataclysm of 2 Peter 3. No, they didn't think that way. What were they thinking? They thought the end of the age, when the temple is destroyed, that would be surely the end of the age, and that's the wording in Matthew 24. All right, so Jesus, in his answer to their questions, gives them signs, and we can divide them up. The first portion of Matthew 24, down to about verse 7 or so, remote signs. You see these things, don't be troubled. The end is not yet. The end of what? He's talking about Jerusalem. Then he comes down, gives us nearer signs, and then he tells us here in verse 21 now, pray that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath. What are they running from? Jerusalem. Say again. The big army. Matter of fact, Luke tells us when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, this is Luke 21, know that her desolation is at hand. Then let them that are in the city flee to the mountains. Let not them that are in the country enter therein. For these are the days of vengeance when all things written are going to be fulfilled. So get out. Their natural inclination would be, let's go to the city for protection, wouldn't it? No, he says, no, don't you do that, because you better get out. It's interesting, only by secular historian Josephus do we learn the fact that the Christians all escaped. And he tells us they went to a little town called Pella, which is on the western side, or rather the eastern side of the Jordan River, about midway up the Jordan River. Partway, but kind of across from Samaria. And he says they all escaped. So that's exactly what he's talking about. So when he says, then shall be great tribulation such as not been from the beginning of the world until now, nor shall ever be. The great tribulation. And except those days have been shortened, no flesh should have been saved. What's he talking about? The destruction of Jerusalem. The destruction of Jerusalem. The great tribulation. And he tells you that in so many words in verse 34. This generation will not pass away till all of these things are accomplished. How about the great tribulation? Lord? Yes, the great tribulation is all of these things. I just told you, all of these things are accomplished in this generation, including the great tribulation. Well, isn't there a great tribulation coming in the future? Who knows? I don't know. I think there may be great tribulation for Americans coming up, but I certainly don't believe it has anything to do with the fulfillment of passages. I've heard some people say, well, we get so enamored with denominational theorizing about end of the world and signs and famines and earthquakes, all of which are listed here, thinking about the signs of the Christ coming again, and we hear that all the time on television. We hear it we see it in the papers. We see it on Facebook. We hear all the preachers, denominational preachers, all over the place talking about it, and there's not one passage in all of the Bible that supports it. Not one. Not one. Isn't that remarkable? How can that be? We're not studying. That's how it can be. And we take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and kind of sprinkle it together and come out with a potion that's like, wow, that sounds fabulous. It has nothing to do with us. It has to do with the destruction of Jerusalem, the Great Tribulation. So, having said that, I come back to Revelation 7, toward the end of the chapter, and he says, these are they that came out of the great tribulation. And he uses the word not came, but he says, do you see that? By the way, let's look at it. Let's see if, let's just try to read carefully here, and don't pay attention to my quote there, because I missed it. So he says in verse 14, you look at it, tell me, how does he say it? These are what? These are they that come. Come. They are coming. Amen. Well, you just have the word came? No, come. Coming. These are ones coming. These are the ones coming. Okay, here's the key. It doesn't say they came out of. It says they are coming out of the Great Tribulation. It's already going on when John's talking. It's right now happening. They're coming out of the Great Tribulation. They're going into heaven. And they're standing before the throne of God. Isn't that a great message? That we have victory, but that's how it happens. And they're coming now, right now, out of the Great Tribulation. It doesn't say it came out of. That'd be all right too, to say it that way, I suppose. But He says they're coming. David?
Escape Jerusalem, only to be killed later.
That's right. And this, remember, these are others, Christians who are out of every nation, tongue, and tribe, that is non-Jews as well, who are coming out of the Great Tribulation. Well, what's going on? You can go back and you can read in the Church Fathers, and you can read about, there are multi-volumes, huge writings of the Church Fathers and the Ante-Nicene, that would be in this period of time, Ante-Nicene period. And they talk about the horrible persecutions that they faced, and it's enough to curdle your blood. I mean, it was pretty horrific. You can even read about it. There's a book that was published many years ago. It's called Fox's Book of Martyrs. You've seen that book, Bruce Evans. Fox's Book of Martyrs. He goes through all that. You have that book? He just goes through it. He says, here's what happened to Christians, and he names them, having searched through all these records. And he just kind of summarizes, here's what happened. A woman, one of them I remember distinctly, was named Christina. They took her to the trial. And they asked her if she was going to be a Christian. Now, she could deny. So you know what, I'm not going to. And then she would have to do obeisance to the Roman emperor because it was imperial worship. She'd have to go and kiss her hand and do an obeisance move toward the imperial god. By the way, what would a Christian today's attitude be with that? Let's think about that for a moment. What do we say? That's okay. That's all right. Well, you know what, I can go back and repent later. Well, and that's in part true. But that's not what she did. No, I'm not going to do it. Well, they put her on the stake. Cooked her right there. That's how it was going. As a matter of fact, Roman governors would write to different emperors and say, hey, and he would say, how do I deal with these Christians? He said, they're going to the stake, and we're burning them. And he said, what's the official policy in Rome? He wrote to Domitian. I don't guess there was an official policy, really, but they said, well, let's think about this, how we're going to do it. How would you like to be a Christian in that time? Ooh, I don't know. But anyway, that gives you a flavor of some of the things that were going on with Christian people in that particular period. All right, any thoughts, any comments? I didn't mean to make everybody so sober that you're like, well, I don't feel like sitting here anymore. It is sobering, though, what our brethren and sisters have gone through in order to be faithful in Christ. And it's pretty remarkable. And I think that's what Revelation 7 is all about. So he's sealing those, that is, they're going to be protected, not necessarily from persecutions, but they were there who were going to wash their robes in white in the blood of the Lamb. And they would do that by being faithful even to the point of, that's 2 and 10 of Revelation, to the point that they die. Be faithful unto death. That means unto the point that you die. Unto the point that you're killed. That's the idea. Be faithful to the point that you're killed for your faith. Am I ready to do that? Well, I have to do some serious thought. That causes me to say, okay, maybe turn the television off for a moment. Sit down by myself with my Bible and think, am I ready for that? I don't know what's going to happen in America. But I tell you what, we've seen some ugly stuff here lately. I don't know if you saw this, but they had up in, I guess it was in Oregon. I'm trying to word it as carefully as possible and not be offensive, but they mocked Christ on the cross in a very horrific fashion. I'll tell you what, the next thing we're going to be coming after Christian people. That's how that mindset works. And it's on Facebook or on, I don't know, YouTube or something. I don't know. But I couldn't even watch it. I couldn't even see it. I saw a photo of it, but I can't see this anymore. It's so horrific. It just makes you want to cry. But that's the kind of culture we live in. So a lot of this has to do with us today too. All right, any questions or thoughts about it? As we conclude, I want to say next week we'll pick up in chapter 8, but I do want to mention a couple things about 144,000 because there are so many errors taught pertaining to the 144,000 made by the Watchtower organization, the Jehovah's Witnesses. They say That means only 144,000, not a person more, is going to be in heaven. What about that? And then the premillennialists, on the other hand, say this is literal. We're to understand it literally. So that would mean 144,000 with them too. No more. So what about some of those ideas? And that's what we'll talk about as we begin class next week. So you might want to think about that. If you might just glance at anything on Google and say, okay, what do they say about the 144,000? Well, you say, oh, okay, we'll find out. So I've given you what I believe to be the truth. Anything that you want to mention or ask or add before we close shop for the day? Nothing from the back. Yes, ma'am. I am so glad someone has something to say.
Well, I know I believe what all we're learning through Revelation, but the world is so, the hearts are so hardened, the minds are closed off, that some churches are preaching the fear of Revelation to bring people back into the church. Fear will motivate them to come back or to repent. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
They use it as a fear tactic. I mean, some believe in it. I don't think all believe in it, but they use it just to try to bring people back to God. The fear of it.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this real briefly. That's a good question about people utilizing the fear that we have in Revelation, the persecutions, to bring people back. In the first place, I don't believe that Revelation applies to us in the same sense, in the primary sense, as we've already gathered. Number two, even though that be the case, we do have at the end of Revelation the great judgment scene in which people will be banished to an eternal darkness, and that is a fearful prospect. And so when Paul was preaching, remember, to Felix, he had one sermon, and he preached the fear of God. And he had that man trembling as he walked out of it. He said he trembled. Well, that being said, that's not to say that's the only thing we ought to be preaching, because the love of God, so there's two sides of it. And what we are not seeing in our culture much is a little bit respect for authority and the judgment and the fear of God. We don't have that much in our culture, do we? So there are two sides of it, the love of God and the fear of God. And both those need to be preached. And I would say, in my personal view, as my opinion, if we've lopsided one way or the other, we've leaned on the grace and the mercy and love of God. We've not taught many young people about the fear of God and give an answer to everything we've done. So I think the only fear that we really should have is for the eternal judgment scene. And that's my particular view. Right? We should have healthy fear of that. And I should say, instead of fear, maybe the word is respect. Respect that, okay, I'm going to give an answer to how I've lived. If people don't have the sense that they give an answer or are going to be required for what they have done, there is a removal of many incentives to do good. There's not many incentives. I mean, sometimes people are moved by simply love. But other people, it takes a little bit of fear. Like, you know what? Yes, sir.
Those older people can remember preachers who preached like hellfire and damnation.
Yeah.
What they wanted to preach.
You know, there's a famous sermon called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, Jonathan Edwards, in the early part of America. And he would have people weeping and crying, and they would be trembling, and they would be coming forward. I'm saying that shouldn't be the whole diet, but I think there's a place for that. So I don't know if that answers what you mentioned on that, Marcel, but.
Well, what I'm thinking of is the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God.
Right. Oh, yeah.
It has wisdom because they have no fear of the Almighty God.
Right.
So they don't believe it because there's no fear.
Right.
So I think you do have to it's a balancing act.
Right.
You need to fear your God.
Right.
But you also know that once you repent and you do fear Him and get wisdom,
Right.
then there is love and peace and understanding. But you have to have both. If you just preach all of godly love,
Right.
it's like a free ticket to sin.
Well, you know what? That's a good point. Really is. That's a good point. Good comments. Oh, Lisa?
I just have a comment
Right.
So they're relying on God's mercy,
Right.
that they're not going to be destined to go.
You know, and Lisa and Marcella both brought up that there are two sides to it, and that's correct. We are leaning way too far on one side at this particular point. There needs to be, and I like that passage that you mentioned, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. That has to do, of course, with the fear of the Lord, and that would be a respect for God. God is loving, He's forgiving, and we all rely upon the grace of God. If we were not, then there was no hope for any of us. However, God is a just God also, and He is a non-respecter of persons, and He says, here's what I want you to do, and here's how you're going to live. If you refuse to do it, then there is not a hope for you at all.
He also says not to be mocked. So people that
Yep.
continue in sin, either repent or don't repent.
Right.
Continue in the sin. I mean, this is the argument I hear out there. Well, you know, God forgive me, I can do this. And you can't keep doing the same sin.
Right, yeah. And that's right, you have to repent. And repentance is the keystone of it. I think that's a direct challenge to the willpower of man. That's right.
But you have to repent, and then you have to turn away from it, because
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
you haven't repented really at all.
That's correct too. She mentioned you have to turn away from sin. That's what repentance involves. That's the fruit of repentance. So, you know what? Now you all got going here. When we're supposed to close, but that's all right. I said, now, that's all right. Yeah, I guess I did. I thought you might ask me a true/false question or something. That's okay. No, that's great, and I'm delighted for the discussion. I'm delighted for you to add to whatever we have here. So, okay, we'll take a break, and then we'll be back in a few moments. All right.